Hello, it's Riikka Kovasin here with another series for Seth Apter Creative Team. This time I had a couple of starting points for my projects. First was that I'm journaling with senses, so using sight, hearing and then smell for my 3 projects. The other inspiration source is Finnish pieces, so I'm using Finnish art, Finnish music and kind of a scent that I associate with Finland. For this first video, the sense is sight, and I'm using Helene Schjerfbeck and different paintings by her as my inspiration. I'm starting, as you can see, with making some layers to a white cardstock. These will be hidden in the long run. I'm adding some links to the paintings I used by Schjerfbeck as inspiration, so you can look them up as well. From those you can see that she doesn't use a lot of pattern, let's say. The surfaces or the paint areas are really just paint areas. There's a texture, but there's not much pattern in them. So that's why I'm making my first layer with archival ink, so it doesn't start bleeding when I am adding layers on top, and making those stenciled and stamped layers at the bottom, so they are just barely peeking through after all the layering. After I had my first layers down in the paper, so there's the stamping, stenciling, and then some acrylic paints on top, I'm making a dimensional or a raised pattern of sorts. I'm mixing some texture powder to my acrylic paints, which makes them thicker and also gives them this grainy effect. I then use those paints to paint on top of the smoother surface. The texture powder also dries up the paint, so when you add too much of it, let's say, it's all grains, so you really need to be careful how much you add, but I really like the effect because it's almost like pastel looking. You can really mix the colors and give that soft tone. When I'm happy with those layers, I then dry the sheet and continue to next step. So next I'm adding some modeling paste to my page. I'm using a palette knife and try to get a thick layer in parts to the sheet, kind of just adding a little bit more texture, a little bit more happening to the sheet. While the paste is still wet, I dry it just a little bit. I wet a stamp with just water and then press it to the modeling paste, and that way I can create that dimensional look with the stamp to the wet paste. Here you can see the final sheet. Then I cut the sheet to a smaller piece and add it to my art journal. In all of the 3 art journal pages I'm using Tim Holtz paper dolls, and for this one I chose a little girl. The little girl reminds me of some Schjerfbeck's works called Dancing Shoes. And later I will color her in the colors in that painting. But the girl needs some kind of a background, so she doesn't just float in the page. So I add some old receipts in there and also create layers using washi tapes. I'm adding a white embossed detail to the background of the girl, And as you can see, I have two compositions going on, kind of two clusters. The upper corner is to balance the bigger one at the bottom. So I tie those two together using some splashes. When I color the little doll, I give her black socks and blonde hair inspired by the paintings. I'm using alcohol markers and also a white Posca paint marker. Whenever I make a project, I try to add some dark or black elements to it, as well as white. So at the moment, this page is too white, too pale. There's not enough contrast. So I make a little piece using black cardstock, but make it more like a dark blue version by adding some icing ice on top. As ice is translucent, so it's kind of giving a blue glaze over the piece. Then I highlight the embossed pattern using blue acrylic paint. I make the strip a little bit thinner and smaller and then adhere it to my page. As the contrast is quite high with the white receipt, I add a little bit of scribbling on top using a white Posca marker. Then it's time to add the girl to my page, and to make a dimensional effect I use foam tape for that. As a finishing touch, I add some pencil here and there, and then a teeny tiny touch of stamping as well. When the page is finished, I added some journaling there by cutting words from old books. For these three projects, I decided to go with Finnish journaling, but I'll translate it to my blog post so you can read what the page says. Here's the picture of the finished page and then some detailed shots. Please be back tomorrow for another page inspired by senses, and this time I'm using hearing. Bye bye for now.